Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. We have a really great guest on today. She's an artist and designer based in London. She's a regular speaker at festivals around the world and in universities, and was a guest lecturer at LCC, University of Arts London, London Metropolitan University, and University of Hertfordshire. She was judge president for D&AD Professional Awards and has been a judge for D&AD New Blood, Design Week Awards, Latin American Design Awards, just to name a few. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Boris. Welcome.
Thank you.
Are you ready for 20 questions?
Yes, I'm ready. And thanks for this really nice intro.
Okay. Question one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
Well, I think you summed it up quite well, but I'm an artist and designer. Nowadays, I split my time between both practices, but they also meet sometimes, and they feed each other. And currently, more specifically, I'm working on a series of modular artworks, and I'm preparing three upcoming solo exhibitions for this year. So it's quite a big year for me and my art practice. And just to add a bit more, my work spans from drawing, sculpture, printmaking, painting, to design commissions, which are more in the field of graphic design, but which can sometimes also take the shape of furniture or functional sculptures. So I really like to keep things quite open, and I like to try new things. That's my short intro.
Great. Just a note for our audience, if you guys are interested in the UK episodes, check out our very recent episode with Jonathan Barnbrook. Okay, question two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
I saw this question when you sent me the questions, and I think it's quite a difficult question. Like I prefer if someone tells what they feel I'm different. But basically, I think something that makes me different is maybe my outlook on things and the fact that I get excited by really small, mundane things. And I think that's also something that a lot of creatives have. We just have a way of looking at the world and noticing small cracks in a street pavement, or a flower growing in the corner of a road. Or I think it's just those things where really I've noticed that I'll be walking side by side with someone else, and we notice things differently. And I think that's the main thing. It's this capacity to see things that others might not.
Mm, great. Okay. Number three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
That's another good question, but I have to say that I've been questioning my practice a lot recently, especially because I'm delving into my art practice a lot more, and so moments of change are moments of questioning. And I've been having a feeling of absolute well-being when I've been recently doing artworks, and I think that sums up why we do what we do, is that there's a natural drive and a natural call to making what we do. And I think our field is a lot about making, and sometimes we're servicing other people more, and sometimes we're just inherently making decisions to create. And I would just say it's really a natural call for me.
Great. Some people struggle with number four, but the question is, what does your future look like?
So I'm really someone who lives in the moment, and I'm not like a person who will make like grand plans, like in 5 years I'll be doing this, and in 6 years I'll be doing that, and in 10 years I'll move to Mexico. Well, maybe I wish. But I think I've never had plans, and that's what's really also I think left the door open to a lot of surprises and a lot of different U-turns in my pathway. One thing that I would say is that I hope my future is full of color and full of travels. And, I kind of hope also a world that where borders don't really count. So I know it sounds a little bit, utopic, but I'm really a big believer in this idea of unity and being able to go from one place to another. And I think our field allows that also in quite a magical way through the festival talks. And so I hope to be doing more festival talks. I hope to exhibit abroad as well. I have exhibitions lined up in France and in the UK at the moment. But I really, hope to go further afield. And I think each new place inspires a series of new artworks and a series of new questions. And the people inspire me a lot in general. So I hope my future is a mix of all these things.
Great. And 5 we say is unique to this show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Again, the notion of place has been quite important in some of my recent artworks. So, for example, I've been doing a residency in a harbor, and it's completely shifted my way of making certain artworks because they were highly influenced by the notion of place. I was born in London, and my parents then went to the US. I grew up in the US, so I did the whole of kindergarten in the US until the age of 6. And then my parents lived in France, and then I moved back to the UK. So I think for me, there's the notion of place is less specific. So I don't feel like I belong specifically to one place. And I've been also very lucky to live in cities which are very international. So for example, in London, I've met people from Brazil, Spain, obviously some people from France, some people from the UK, some people from the US, a lot of people from Japan, Korea, and it's just really, really, really open. And I mean, in the way I know it. And I think that notion of, international and sort of being in a melting pot is really important for me. I feel more comfortable in cities where there are people from a lot of influences and a lot of different origins. I find that really inspiring, and I feel it's important as well in not staying in a specific bubble. And of course, it's influenced me in terms of language. So I'm constantly shifting from French to English. Obviously, my accent is a bit more French, given my mother tongue is French. But it's also influenced a lot how I think about words in my work. And one of the pieces I'm preparing actually for hopefully this year is a book and series of artworks on language which look at French and English. So I'm excited about that one, and I think this one speaks about the places I've been growing in and my origins as well, my dual identities.
Great. So number 6, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
I found actually that's a harder one than number 4. But for number 6, I would, yeah, it's just a bit of a tricky one for me. But I would say that, don't listen to people who are negative or who try to stop you on your tracks. I think we're in a very, competitive and difficult field, and it's constantly changing, and the landscape we're in is constantly changing. So, but because it's so competitive, I think not everyone's always going to be supportive. And so I think it's really important not to let yourself be clouded with negative encounters at the beginning, because I particularly had a few, sadly. And I think it's just important to remember why you're doing what you're doing and stay strong, and also remember that you're at the beginning of a journey constantly and that you're always going to evolve. So that's the advice to my former self.
Great. And what's the day in your life like?
Well, this will sound very cliche, but it starts with coffee. And I think symbolically, making coffee for myself also marks a sort of transition in my journey, where I left my full-time job 10 years ago. And the act of making coffee in the morning and not being in an office is related also to a sort of new sense of found freedom, and it still feels new after 10 years. Um, So there will be coffee, and then none of my days after the coffee moment look alike. Some days I'll be making artworks and working maybe a little bit on a design commission. On another day, I'll be replying to an interview request or speaking on a podcast and meeting new people from around the world. And sometimes I'll be traveling to go and speak to a festival. Next week, I'm actually going to speak at a university in north of the UK. And the week after, I'm going to Normandy in France to put down an exhibition, a solo exhibition of my works that is on at the moment. And then I'm traveling to the south of France to put up another exhibition. So all these things mean that nothing's ever the same, and there's always a lot of new stuff happening. So yeah, and I like the fact that I don't have a specific routine. It really inspires me to have sort of free form, flowing sort of week. And one other really important thing in my practice, but also in my life, is walking. So every day I try to walk at least for an hour, if not more. It's sometimes a bit hard if the weather is rough. But that's also something where it's really helped me in terms of finding ideas. I find a lot of ideas when I'm walking. So yeah, that's sort of roughly how my days look.
Great. And 8 is around lifelong learning. It's a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
So I love learning new things, and I feel like I'm always a beginner in everything. I love being taught. I love listening to people. And last year specifically, I went to a couple of residencies in Burgundy, where I did wood workshops. I learned natural dyeing for coloring of textiles. So we were like picking branches in the wood and then mixing them and getting beautiful hues like orange or red. And then another workshop there was to build a solar oven with an amazing designer called Nathalie Crasset. She's a French product designer. And I think also just learning things in new fields that aren't necessarily specific to the field that I'm working in, has been particularly fulfilling and amazing, and really also inspiring for my own practice. And then I also learn in other ways. Of course, I often like, through reading, watching documentaries. And again, when I go to various festivals, I love hearing about other people's journey. And recently also I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, of course yours, because I was super interested to discover all the conversations. And I like the format because it's quite short compared to some podcasts which are way too long. And I find it's a really nice mix of people that you've invited. So that's some of the ways I keep learning.
Great. And tools. What tools do you use? Do you use digital and analog tools?
Yes, definitely. So at the moment, some of my favorite tools and some of my necessary tools include, so in the favorite tools, there's a set of color pencils that are actually Prismacolor pencils, which are sadly really hard now to find in Europe. They're easier to find in Canada and the US. So I thought maybe that's my call, my call to come and visit, and get a restock of those. But I've been doing a lot of artworks with those. And of course, then there's the paper. And of course, I'm using the computer. So, for example, for the book on language that I mentioned earlier, I'm building a custom typeface, which I'm going to use specifically for the words in the book. And of course, I'm using the computer for that. So it's, the computer is still a tool that I use, but one that I want to spend less time with.
Great. And halfway number 10, how do you deal with work-life balance?
So actually that's something I really managed to address when I left my full-time job 10 years ago. I actually left particularly because I wanted a better work-life balance. I was working quite long hours, and everyone said to me, when you're going to set up your own practice, you're going to be working even more. Everything gets blurred between work and life when you're creative and you're running your own practice. You're going to be working evenings and weekends, and that's not true. I think we're all in control of how we handle things. And I've actually been working quite rigorously, like just during daytime hours, and stopping usually around 6 p.m., which does sound early when I think about it compared to what I used to do. And not working at the weekends. And I've actually found that by having that better work-life balance and having more of a separation, I've been more inspired, more productive, and I've done a lot of new things. So that's really the way, that I've dealt with these things, and just being also quite open with clients about if they contact me at the weekend, and just gently reminding them that I'll be replying on Monday.
Nice. And 11, if you weren't doing what you do now, what might you be doing?
I think I'd still be doing the same. I thought a lot about it because I always thought, sometimes maybe it would be nice to find a job where we're not always thinking about what we do. I think we're always thinking about the projects we have on, and they're always, tagging along with us. So I sometimes thought I would like to have an arts and crafts shop. It was actually one of my dreams. Like we were speaking with my mother actually once about this, and because I went to kindergarten in the US, and they have amazing arts and crafts supplies, and they have like obviously amazing pencils, but they have all these endless glue colors, and I used to live in front of a candy shop, so I was really close to this idea of like a colorful merchant, and I think there's something really social also about holding a shop. But the other thing I would do as an alternative, and which is something that I really hesitated to study, was French language and being a French teacher. I don't really think I would have done that anyway in the end, but that could be alternatives in another life.
Great. And what would you not like to do with your career?
So one thing that I really know I wouldn't want to do is something where I have to sit again all day in an office every day. I think there's one thing that I've really reclaimed with setting up my own practice is movement. And I think movement is healthy, it's inspiring. And there's also a sense of freedom that I've reclaimed. So anything where I have to sit in an office and, you know, be stuck basically physically, I think would make me quite unhappy.
How about a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
So one of my favorite quotes ever, and I'm a bit obsessed with this one, is "There are flowers everywhere for those who will see them." It's a quote by Matisse, but I think it links up a little bit with what I said for question number 2, with the idea of what makes us different in some ways. And I think it's this potential to notice flowers in the worst places.
And a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Um, I would say my least favorite word is war. I think there are a lot of raging wars at the moment, and I really hope that it's a word we can eradicate in the future. Again, maybe sounds overly optimistic, but I think it's important that we, preserve peace, and that we, make sure that love and humanity comes first.
If you were to choose one word to describe yourself, what word would it be?
This one I find hard as well. I would say free.
What keeps you up at night?
So generally, I'm fine. I don't really stay up, or I don't get too worried. Like I tend to manage to disconnect. But I was quite actually stressed with the solo exhibitions coming up this year, and that has kept me awake. And I think it's partly it's because it's quite new, and partly it feels like because I'm slightly putting myself out there in a way that's, quite substantial. And yeah, I found that process quite difficult. It gave me quite a bit of anxiety. But again, I'm pretty convinced it's a route I want to pursue. So that kept me up a little bit.
Nice. And final stretch here. What's a dream you're chasing?
All the dreams I have are pretty attainable, I would say. So there's I think I never dream of unreal things. But I really want actually to go back to the US. I'd love to travel also in South America, North America, and I'd love to go to Japan and Korea. Anyway, so lots of traveling, and so I think I would say maybe taking like a mini gap of time off to go travel, like maybe 2 or 3 months, something reasonable. But that's a dream, and I've not ever disconnected that long, so I think that would be a really fulfilling, enriching, and adventurous moment for me.
Great. And 18, what inspires you?
Um, so again, a lot of things, but I would just say people inspire me the most. I'm really curious about people, and I'm not nosy. There's a difference, but people I think is what inspires me the most, and I love hanging out with different people. I love hanging out with people who are in completely different fields. I love meeting people in the streets. It's just like it really fuels me. And obviously I love spending time outside. I love art. Art inspires me so much. And I'm also inspired by love.
Great. And any advice you'd like to share?
Um, yes, so I would a piece of advice I would say is always make what you have in mind. Never keep it at the stage of an idea, because an idea only is ever something when you've made it. Otherwise it just stays words. So definitely I would say actions and not just words. And yeah.
Great. And finally, number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? How do we follow you?
So listeners can follow me on my Instagram or Threads or Twitter there, or X as it's called now. They're all under Sarah Boris underscore LDN, which stands for an abbreviation of London. I also have a sort of temporary website, which I'll probably find time to improve one day, under sarahboris.com. And anyone who has further questions is free to get in touch via the contact form, which is actually what you did. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining today. Super
So much
inspiring
for having
hearing
me.
you talk. Yeah, you've got a great way of talking. Fabulous journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and I hope we meet in the future.
Thanks.